Hi guys, Mr. David here. So there are a lot of really interesting jobs out in the world. Take mine for example. I get to read silly books with silly voices, do arts and crafts, and teach fun activities to kids. I love my job, and I can't believe it took me so long to find it. But in finding this job, I had a lot of other jobs working in kitchens at fast food restaurants, selling newspapers, selling insurance, working customer service, and even working as an actor. Now, along the way, I learned a lot, but I also met a lot of interesting people with interesting jobs. You know what? I want to share them with you. I want you to meet my friends and find out about their interesting jobs and what they did to get those jobs and what you can start studying if you want to do that in the future. Does that sound good? So, over the next few weeks, join us as we get to talk to my friends and find out about their really interesting jobs. I hope you enjoy. I love acting. It's one of my favorite things to do. I've been doing it since I was a little kid, and I went to school for it, both here in Arkansas and in New York. I worked as a professional actor out of New York for a couple of years, and I've even gotten paid to perform here in Arkansas. Now, the first thing you gotta know about acting is you gotta memorize the script. The beautiful words that the writers give to you for the story. It's amazing. I wish I had the talent to craft these beautiful stories that these writers do. Well, tonight we have a very special guest. We have a writer, someone that I've known for a long time since I started acting. And he is actually a writer for animated shows. I have a lot of fun sitting down with Michael Rhea, so I hope you enjoy our conversation. All right, guys, I'm here with my good friend, Michael Rhea. Michael, how are you doing tonight?
Hello, I'm great, David. How are you?
All right, so Michael, first off, why don't you tell in your own words what your job is?
My job is to write scripts
Mhm.
for animated TV shows or
All right,
cartoons.
okay. And so how long have you been doing this?
3 or 4 years as a professional. Obviously doing it in my own time for much longer than that.
And how did you get into writing scripts for animated shows?
Well, that's a long story. I, as you know, David, come from the world of theater, where we've been telling stories for many, many, many years. And I've always been someone who liked to tell stories. Um, and I worked in theater when I moved out here to Los Angeles, um, and just picked up a lot of different skills in the world of telling stories because it takes all kinds.
Sure.
Um, and got was fortunate enough to get a production position at a big animation studio in town. They were starting a new TV division, um, and I just worked my way up from production assistant to production coordinator to asset coordinator to writer's assistant to eventually full-time staff writer.
Okay. And what are some of the projects you've actually gotten to work on?
Well, the first cartoon that I worked on was The Adventures of Puss in Boots, which is a
Mhm.
DreamWorks show on Netflix. Um, the second project I was on actually comes out next month. That's July 2020, in the middle of COVID pandemic. On Peacock, it's called Cleopatra in Space, which
Okay.
is a fun. It's based on a graphic novel by Mike Mayhack,
Yeah.
which is a fun sort of space adventure.
Mhm.
And the most recent show that I was just writing on for a year was just announced. It's called Doug Unplugs, and it's based on a children's book. It's actually my first preschool show that I've written for, and it's going to be on Apple Plus sometime in the future.
Okay.
And
Wonderful.
I have no
I
idea when.
actually am familiar with that children's book.
All
So
right, well, we
yeah.
made a TV show.
Well, I look forward to seeing it. So now you talked about coming from theater and picking up skills along the way once you moved to LA. What all did you have to study, or would you advise someone studying if they want to be a professional writer?
Uh, well, I would advise that you study writing. I know that that sounds simple, but
Oh, sure.
it's coming. I mean, honestly, coming from Arkansas, where we are from, it's difficult to wrap your mind around the idea that someone can make a living writing
Mhm.
for television or film, um, because I never knew anyone growing up who made a living writing for television or film. The only writers, in our hometown wrote for the local newspaper,
Sure.
which is a very specific and different skill set, even though it's still writing. But luckily, we had a really good foundation in English.
Hmm.
I feel like at the school we went to, um, just it's so easy. I remember being in school and just in English class learning so many skills, just like with math, that I thought, when am I ever going to need to know what a present participle is or a progressive verb? Like who in the real world uses these things? And it's really to build a foundation.
Sure.
English is really important in just mastering that language, um, reading as much as you possibly can, writing as much as you possibly can, creative writing, short stories, just practice makes perfect. You just
Yeah.
practice, 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 and do it over and over and over. And there's so many books on screenwriting that you can use. I did not study writing in college.
Hmm.
I don't know where I didn't even know that you could, I don't think, study screenwriting when I was 18. When I was
Sure.
applying to go to college, but you can.
Mhm.
And there are really great schools all around the nation. So just if you want to do it, you can do it. So if you're lucky enough to know you want to be a screenwriter, when you're young, the go for it. You go get a degree in it. I didn't do it. I wish I could go back and do it. But I've sort of wound my way into being able to do this for a living.
Sure.
But I could have probably saved 10 years if I'd, been able to hone it and, figure that out and go to school for it. So
Absolutely.
don't, you can do it. You can do it as
Yeah.
a career. You don't
Well,
have to move out to LA and
reading
then
and
go to
writing
school to
are
do
a
it.
muscle. So the more you do it, the stronger you get with it. Now, you mentioned
Totally.
reading everything you can. Are there like particular authors that you remember from around middle school, high school age that you feel had a direct influence on you?
I
I
don't
know I
know.
caught you off guard with that one.
No, that I can't think of. I mean, Tolkien, I guess when I was in middle school, I read Lord of the Rings about 5 times. Um, and I just, I love fantasy and I love
Sure.
sci-fi. And that was the best thing I had ever read. I couldn't imagine any work of fiction being written that could eclipse that when I was in middle school or high school. Um, and yeah, honestly, just read what you love.
Right.
Read what you love. I mean,
Absolutely.
obviously, your teachers are going to tell you to read stuff you don't want to read, and then you might find things that you enjoy that you didn't know you could enjoy. But yeah, I mean, Tolkien for me
Mhm.
he was the pinnacle forever. I didn't think I'd ever read a book that I love more than Lord of the Rings in my life.
Have you found one
I
that you
did.
love
Spoilers,
more,
I
or do you
did.
still
But
gravitate to Lord of the Rings?
huh?
Have you found one that you love more, or do you still gravitate to Lord of the Rings?
Oh my God, I'm reading James Clavell's Shogun right now
Okay.
for about the third time, and now I think that's the best book ever written.
Shogun.
Um,
I'll have to look that one up because I haven't
oh,
read
it's
that one.
amazing. Have you read Robert Penn Warren's All the King's Men?
Yes.
Oh, oh boy, that's amazing. Yeah, political intrigue. I would say Shogun is like All the King's Men with samurais.
Okay. That's interesting. All right.
Yeah.
So, what is your favorite thing about your job?
I I get to go into an animation studio and sit at my computer and write stories all day. Um, I mean, the job itself is my favorite part of the job. Though
Sure.
I will say to people who are wanting to get into the entertainment business and the film and
Mhm.
television business, animation people are the best people there are. Just fun and funny and honestly caring people. I mean, it we make cartoons. There are
Right.
people who love cartoons. It's just the people are the best.
Oh,
And
yeah.
yeah, that's the job is great, but my favorite part of the job honestly is the people I get to work with all the time.
I am a huge nerd when it comes to voice actors, cartoon voice actors, especially, and watch documentaries and behind the scenes about them. They are fantastic performers who don't get recognized as much because they're behind the scenes. And so I just love that field. So going we talked about your favorite thing. What's the toughest thing about your job? Now that doesn't mean the thing you dislike, but just something that is the hardest aspect to do.
Well, the thing about being a staffed writer on a show, is that the writing schedule does not wait for inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you're sitting at home and you're wanting to write, the next great novel, you have time to sit and think and try and hone the perfect idea, the perfect thing. Uh-uh. When you got scripts due and outlines and you've got to break stories, you just got to do it, and
Sure.
it's not always going to be perfect because you when it's due, you got to turn in the best you got, and that's a challenge. It's a challenge. And then you get notes. You are going to be criticized, and get notes on every single thing you turn in, whether that's something that is the best that you could come up with,
Mm-hmm.
or whether that or it's going to be the best you could come up with, but whether you had to come up with that idea in a day or a week or a month. um, so it's just, again, like you said earlier, you're training a muscle,
Sure.
and the more you do it, hopefully the more I do it, the better I'll get too. Just but it's just hard just to continually just keep going and going and going, um and some days you don't want to write,
Yeah,
but you just got to go do it because that's the job. um
absolutely. So,
yeah,
if someone was wanting to pursue this, was wanting to go in the field of writing for animated television or live action television, just or movies, just writing in general, what's the biggest piece of advice you could give them other than read everything this because we've mentioned that, but what if you could give them some advice to help them out, what would you say?
sure, sure. So aside from just write,
Mm-hmm.
I would say do not be afraid to let people read what you've written, and do not be afraid to ask for feedback, and welcome feedback,
Sure.
because feedback is what makes you better. It
Mm-hmm.
feels wonderful to give somebody something you've written and them to say, I love this. This is wonderful. This is fantastic. And that's great. But when someone reads it and says, I liked it, but
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really understand why this happened, or this character doesn't feel fleshed out to me, or they felt like when they made this choice it wasn't quite within their character. It's really hard, and that's another muscle that you train as a writer, is to take criticism and to take feedback. um, and that's the stuff that makes you better.
Sure.
Because if you're going to do it as a professional, you're going to have to learn how to take the criticism and turn it into a positive. And that's a really, really good thing.
Sure.
So I would say, that's, and also, if someone is going to take the time to read things you have written, they're giving you a gift,
Mm-hmm.
and that gift is their time. And that's the greatest gift that someone can give a writer, is
Absolutely.
their time to read something that they've written, whether they like it or not. It's a wonderful gift they're giving you. So yeah, learn to take criticism and learn to welcome it. Um, and if you're fortunate enough when you do get to school, to intern somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
where you might want to write one day, an animation studio or a literary house or somewhere like that. Just meeting the people, just meeting the people who do what you do, and just being nice to them, and hopefully, getting them to read your stuff one day. And
Sure.
um, yeah, those are all things. Just being good and kind, and finding ways to meet the people who do what you want to do. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah.
All right. Now, we mentioned being a staff writer. So I've seen on some things where they talk about writing staffs for shows. There's a showrunner and then the staff. Um, how does that dynamic break down? Does the showrunner create the whole season, then the staff writers go out and write the individual episodes? What's the breakdown
It very much depends on the show.
there? Okay.
So every show is different, but broadly speaking, what I've come to realize is standard, at least for the projects that I've been on, is that you have a showrunner who is
Hmm.
your executive producer in charge of writing, um, and they're the big boss of the
Hmm.
show, or the head writer. And this is not the same in film, but this is a TV thing. Is that the
Sure.
writer is the person in charge of the show, and um, they are the showrunner is by proxy the head writer of the show. They would write every episode if they could, but they don't have time because they're making a million other decisions about a million other things. So
Sure.
they hire someone called a story editor, which is their proxy head writer for the room. And then if you're lucky, they hire staff,
Hmm.
which is several people who come in every single day, and are constantly working on new stories. And if you want, we can go into how an actual script becomes a finished
Sure.
script later
Yeah.
on. But whatever you're working on for the day, you write that, and when you think that is done, you hand it to the story editor,
Hmm.
who's the head writer. They then go over it, edit it essentially. Um, if you're lucky, they edit it really quick. If it takes them a long time, you kind of freaked out, because you're trying to make their job as easy as possible.
Sure.
Um, and then if the schedule allows, and if you're lucky enough, they can pass it on to the showrunner, who will do a pass on the script and then hand it out to executives for notes. If you're in a crunch and the showrunner trusts the story editor, occasionally it'll go straight from the story editor to execs. But ideally, staff writer will write it, send it to the story editor will edit, send it to the showrunner will approve, sometimes send it to the script coordinator, who's the writer's assistant, to fix anything grammatical and do formatting and stuff. And then the story editor will the script coordinator will then distribute it to all the relevant parties, the
Sure.
executive, storyboard teams, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then it'll come back in with notes, and then you'll do it all over again.
Okay. Seems like a lot of steps, but it seems like a lot of things to make sure that it is the best product possible.
Yeah, and sometimes all shows are different. Like sometimes with an outline or a draft, you write it, you get it to a certain point. Say you're writing an outline and it's due in 2 days, and you think, okay, well, I want to get a read of it.
Hmm.
So you get it as good as you can by that time limit. You know, you schedule a meeting, all the writers and the showrunner, if you're lucky, all of you sit around a table, you do a table read, you get notes from everyone in the room, and then you go back, fix all the notes, send it to the story editor, they do a pass, showrunner, they do a pass, and then it goes out.
Okay. Now you
Yeah,
you mentioned that you might talk about how a script in general comes to be.
sure.
Yeah.
So let's say you've got there's a cartoon that's being made, right?
Hmm.
You've got the green light, it's going, the cartoon's being made. Um, you're all staffed up. Let's say you want to. So some shows are some shows are serialized, and some shows are episodic. If you're serialized, maybe you all get together and break the season, figure out
Okay.
what the season arc story is going to be. Like Cleo in Space, we have a season arc. There are each episode is self-contained, but you also have to do a whole story. So maybe you all meet at the beginning and do a room, and you break that, figure out what that long story is going to be, heavily influenced by the showrunner. Let's say you're episodic, like Doug Unplugs. We're episodic, which means there's not some big, long, season-long story. Each thing is a self-contained little
Sure.
story, and you have to figure out what that story is. So you as writers, you're going to go off on your own. Let's see, you go off and you sit on a bench outside at your beautiful animation studio, and you're struck with an idea, and you think this would make a great episode, right?
Hmm.
Write that down. You take it to your story editor. You talk over it. Maybe, oh yeah, maybe that'll work, and maybe change this a little bit. So then you write up what's called a springboard. Like a little blurb about what that episode is going to be. Send it to the showrunner. Showrunner, I don't know. Yeah, maybe this, and then tweak it a little bit. Okay, so you tweak it up a little bit. You have the story.
Hmm.
Then you send that off, and then you hope you have your fingers crossed. And you wait 2 days, right? And then it comes back from the network, and the network says, "Oh yes, we love that. We love that story. Write it." You say, "Great. Okay, now I get to write the story." So then your name's on the writing schedule. You've got a title. I've got a story that I'm going to write, or a concept at least. Take that concept. Now you need to write an outline. So outlines are different based on what show you're on again. But an outline is essentially just writing out what's going to happen with the story, beginning, middle, and an end.
Sure.
So, a premise would be, if my show was, let's say I had a show called David the Librarian, right? And it was this really fun, exciting show about David who interviews people. And I'm
Sure.
like, oh, what would be a great episode of David the Librarian is David interviews Michael Jordan. And everyone's like, we love it. Yeah, let David interview Michael Jordan. So then everyone passes on this. Okay, so now I have to write an outline.
Hmm.
So that outlines the story. And I was like, okay, David's going to interview Michael Jordan. We need a beginning, middle, and an end. So then you have to sit down and think, David's going to decide to interview Michael Jordan. And then, but what if Michael Jordan breaks his leg? And then after he breaks his leg, so then David has to go on a road trip to Chicago. And then he's going to go to Chicago. And like, okay, so you write all that down, right? And you have 3 pages, beginning, middle, and an end, story and prose, just like that.
Sure.
Once again, you submit that as an outline. It goes through all the stages, story editor, showrunner, whatever. It goes to the network, fingers crossed. Then they like it. Comes back. Notes. All right. So you got all your notes. You address all your notes. And then you get to go to script. So then your story is done. You know what your story is going to be. And you sit down, in your final draft, and you write your script. And
Okay.
you make sure the script follows your outline. All the characters are in the right voice. And make sure it's the right length, which is very important. And then, you do a table read with the team. If you're lucky, send it to your story editor. They do a pass on it, change things. Showrunner, if you're lucky, does a pass on it, changes things. Goes out, first draft to the network. Fingers crossed. All right. Comes back. More notes. All right. This is where I was talking about criticism. You got to learn to love it, because it's
Oh, yeah.
coming. So more notes, more opinions. Whether you agree with it or not, that's what you got to do, and
Yeah.
that's the job. So you incorporate those into your story. Second draft, send it back out. Fingers crossed. All right. Comes back in. Maybe more notes, maybe not more notes. Sometimes the second draft is approved. Sometimes the second draft has 1 or 2 notes. By this time, the schedule's getting a little bit tight.
Mhm.
Storyboard teams are getting ready, because they're going to need that script to start storyboarding the
Sure.
episode. So then sometimes tweaks. If it's a really rough script, sometimes you do a full pass. Third draft, you hope third draft is what you go and take to the studio to record your actors with. And
Okay.
that's what's called a record draft. Once you have a record draft, you're pretty much done with that episode, and it's in the hands of the other teams. So that's the process.
Now, on average, about how long from a concept where you do the springboard to outline to the 3 drafts of the script, about average, how long of a process is that time-wise?
It depends on a lot of things. It depends on what studio you're at, and how much time they have allotted. It depends on whether you're writing 11-minute episodes
Mm-hmm.
of animated television or 22-minute episodes of animated television. 11s, generally generally you have from the time you conceive of the episode to the time it has to be fully written. I'd have to, if I didn't have the schedule in front of me. 1 week for, you have about a week for the outline.
Okay.
And you have, it's about you have to have a new finished script every couple of weeks, I believe.
Okay.
And I believe you have a month with 22-minute episodes. So you'd have 2 weeks for outline, 2 weeks. That would be a week. I'm not sure how long for second drafts and third drafts. I'd have to look at the schedule for that.
Sure.
But I would say a few weeks for an 11-minute, and then a month to a month and a half for 22s.
And are you working on just one at a time, or is there times that you're doing the outline of one, but you're writing the third draft of another? And
very much.
Okay.
Yeah, they're always staggered. So, based on whatever the animation schedule is, it's staggered. Either a new script is launched every week or every 2 weeks or every, just depending on what the schedule is and depending on how many staff writers you have in the room, it's a rotation. So let's say you have 3 writers and you're launching a script every 2 weeks. So then you get one, 2 weeks later, the second writer, 2 weeks later, the third writer, then 2 weeks later, you get one again.
Sure.
And it would just keep going like that. Or if there are only 2 writers, you and one other person, then maybe you get a script every 2 weeks, but maybe it takes a month to write the script. So then you're writing on 2, but then you're also because remember, you also have to break the stories down the line too.
Right.
Even if you're working on an outline for one script, you're working on the draft for another script, but if you don't break a story that's approved, then you don't have anything to write when that next one is done.
Right.
You got to keep going.
Now, you mentioned writing in a character's voice, making sure you're writing in a character's voice. Now, you and our connection all the way back to middle school and beyond has mostly been in our shared love of theater and performing. We did a lot of acting things together. Do you feel that helped get into writing in other characters' voices?
Yeah, definitely. Just pretending and being silly and having fun, and honestly not being afraid to just go for it. And that's one thing that getting up in front of other people and pretending and getting in character like that, because honestly the best stuff that I've come up with has been stuff that in my head I thought, I can't pitch this. There's no way they're going to go for this. This is so ridiculous. And then I'll convince myself to say it, and they're like, great, go with that. That's it. That's the stuff. So just learning how to just be big and not be afraid and just go for it is a big lesson that theater learns. And honestly, I told you that animation people, animation is the people are the best. Honestly, I feel that way about theater too. The thing that drew me to theater was the people, just bonkers, fun people who like to just have a good time and just tell stories that are just silly and fun. It's kind of in my mind, it's kind of a natural progression in that way.
Sure. All right. Well, I think I've gotten all of the questions I have down. I think I've asked everything. Hopefully this wasn't too painful for you.
No, I hope it wasn't too painful for you.
Oh, not at all. I learned so much. I found it interesting. Like I said, I'm a huge fan of animated television, and I just like learning about behind the scenes stuff. So this was a lot of fun for me.
Anything you want to know, I'm here. I'm happy to answer.
Well, thank you once again for joining us, and I hope you have a wonderful night.
You too, man.
I hope you guys enjoyed my conversation with Michael Rhea. I've known Michael for so long, since we were kids ourselves, and it was really fun to sit down and talk with him. And I learned so much about all the steps that it goes through to get a show scripted. I didn't know all of those. I hope you guys enjoyed it too and learned a lot. Now, make sure you come back next week, because we're going to stay behind the camera, and actually talk to a camera operator and director of photography for a reality TV show. Does that sound fun? It does to me. So I'll see you guys next week. Thanks again. Bye.